Hey, it's Guy B from Vital MX. Welcome to the third episode of The Inside Line, presented by Thor. This week's guest is Doug Dubach. We chatted with Doug just before the Southwick National, where he was set to celebrate his 55th birthday by racing his son in the 125 race before the national motos. We covered a lot of territory in this one, from his early days as a struggling privateer, through his pro days, many titles at the Vet Worlds, bike development, and his own exhaust company. If you're checking this out on Vital MX, we've got a batch of photos under the podcast player, so you can see some of the things that we reference. If not, you may want to head there to see them. Before we dive into the show, it's time for a quick pit stop to take care of our sponsors. The Inside Line is presented by Thor, celebrating 50 years of racing heritage, the first, the forever, Thor Motocross. Also, thanks to Chaparral Motorsports. From lubes and tires to MX jerseys, gear bags, hard parts, and a huge selection of dirt bikes, Chaparral Motorsports has everything you need to keep roosting on the track or trail. Check out chapmoto.com. That's chapmoto.com. Okay, with that out of the way, let's do this. Hey, welcome to this episode of the Inside Line podcast from Vital MX. This week's guest is Doug Dubach. Good to see you.
Yeah, how you guys doing? It's great to be here with Steve, and what a better place to have a little chat than Southwick, Massachusetts.
Well, can you still get a whiff of the new podcast smell?
Yeah. Smells like a new car.
All right. Looking over some of the history stuff, I was stoked to see that your first bike was a Cat mini bike, but I don't know that a lot of the riders these days know exactly what that's all about.
Well, that's this a long time ago. Cat mini bike was basically a lawnmower engine that they put into a steel frame with a piece of steel on the rubber rear tire for a brake, and they sold it in just the most generic places. We got mine in a local. It was called Gemco. Those grocery stores are long gone. I think it was sort of the early creations of like a Costco, because it was a little one of those things that had everything in it, not just not a grocery store, but. Yeah, so 3 horsepower Cat mini bike. That was the early beginnings.
And no suspension?
No. I had the 3 horsepower, and then we later got the 5 horsepower that they actually slid springs over the solid steel fork to give it the appearance that it had suspension. So even the upgraded, and his was painted gold, which was always an envy of me because mine was a real weird dull orange, but that was quite the ride. Your suspension was basically how much tire pressure you put in it.
But back in the day, that was a cheap way for guys to get into two-wheeled motorsports.
Yeah, my dad kind of hid the cost from, more my mom than me, but I don't even know what we paid for that thing, but it couldn't have been much. It was bottom of the barrel. But, yeah, even most of my buddies around the neighborhood, it was something that, secondary used, whatever, that we just all managed to piece together and then go find an empty field.
And you could run a ton of gas through them and have a ball.
Yeah, it's very different. I've talked to my son about it, how, we, in the summertime, we wouldn't see home or our parents for sun up to sundown. We'd all be on a BMX bike, and, we'd have some little school backpack with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a thermos in it, and we would be gone all day. Literally, hunger would bring us back home, but that was about the time the sun went down.
You also had some family roots in racing. I think your dad was involved in...
My dad was a drag racer, so something that not a lot of people didn't really know my dad, because he wasn't really involved in the moto, because he was in a wheelchair since even before I was born. He had an accident at Disneyland, a work accident involving the Matterhorn, and it's a whole nother long story. But so he wasn't a very mobile guy, so he didn't get out, like these mini bikes were his way to... He would drive up to my uncle's in Hesperia. We lived in Anaheim near Disneyland, and we'd drive up to Hesperia, not very often because it was a long day for my dad being in a wheelchair out in the desert and whatnot. But so he actually, having that racing background was, helped me with all my passion and mechanical abilities and things, because, I was always leaning over the fender of his race car and whatnot. But he was more of, after his accident, he was more of a car owner and builder than driver. But he he only got to see me race 2 times. Once when I was like mini bike, 80cc, and once at Anaheim Stadium. So that was the extent of his and mine racing together. But yeah, he certainly taught a lot taught me a lot growing up, just all the mechanics and just, welding, and I could do all that stuff. Young, 10, 11 years old, I could weld. I knew the firing order of a small block Chevy. I could change brakes on the neighbor's car. I mean, I was just one of those kids that had such a passion for anything that had a motor in it.
What kind of car was it?
He had his most famous car was a 33 Willys Coupe, candy apple red, and it was really a shame because he passed away in '99, and it was about a year later that they did this whole resurgence of those cars, that whole era, the Gasser era,
nostalgia,
and so this it was like a Mattel, like a Hot Wheels car, but it was Playing Mantis, I think was the company. But they made a replica of his candy apple red 33 Willys Coupe, and it was so cool. My cousin actually discovered it. I had a cousin, he's 1 day older than me, and we kind of kept in touch, and he kind of showed me them on the internet. I was like, oh, this is so cool. And I ended up ordering hundreds of them. I gave them to everybody I knew. But then a few years after that, another, I can't remember the name of it, but a die-cast company did a super, super job of I think it was about a 16th scale model, die-cast model of the same candy apple red car. It was Bones Dubach Paisano, and anyone that knows anything about racing knows that Joe Paisano started Vanola Pistons and had, great success all through drag racing. So, yeah, but him and my dad and another little, 90-pound, that's why his name was Bones, this guy that drove it. And, but that was Orange County Raceway, Lions Drag Strip, all that stuff, just hanging over the fender, just loving all of that.
How'd you progress from the mini bike?
So my brother got into bikes with a friend of his. They worked together and goofed off together, got in trouble together, and they got, his other friend, a guy named Kenny Linderman, who effectively helped get me started in racing. They always had bikes and played with bikes, and then I got a XR75, the last of the gray ones. Or actually, I shouldn't. Yeah, it was last of the gray. It wasn't the round tank. It was the sleek Elsinore tank, but still gray. And I envied everyone that had the red tank. But so I had that just as fun and play bike for a while, and that my dad loved it because it was a 4-cycle engine, and he would get cams and pipes, and he would hot rod the thing out, and we scattered a lot of engines because he leaned on them a little far, but never raced, never even thought to race until one day my brother and his friend were just kind of almost taunting me as a dare to go race. And I'm like, oh, no way. You got to be good to do that. And I just, I had only played in the hills with all my buddies. And so one thing led to another, and we borrowed a bike from Premier Yamaha down there on Beach Boulevard in Huntington. I think it's actually changed names now, but I believe it's still there. And those guys helped me with a bike, and that whole first day was a bit of a disaster because that was the point at Yamaha had just changed from the 77 YZ80 to the 78, and it was like going from a dinosaur to a modern bike. So they had actually brought me this bike to race, and it's like this fully modded out 77. Well, my buddy, I'd been riding his 78 a little bit, bone stock, and he came with us that day for my first race, air quotes, and I rode this bike in practice, and it's kind of having problems cutting out and doing some funny things, so I ended up racing my buddy's bone stock 78. I rode mini novice back when it was 3 motos, and I was right in the transition of that because that was the only time I rode 3 motos in my career, other than doing some Loretta stuff many years later. But it was just I guess meant to be. I don't know, but I rode the novice class because they had a beginner, but that was more of a first aid class. I rode the novice class and won the first 2 motos by a mile, and then managed to destroy my buddy's bike in the 3rd moto. So I went 1-1 DNF in my first day ever racing. If anybody remembered that 78 YZ80, they ended up selling a frame support kit for around the swing arm, because it was a box frame where the swing arm went on the outside. Yeah, and it was about enough hours on that bike that the frame broke, chain off, chain through the cases. I mean, it was just a yard sale. So that was the beginning of many other mechanical DNFs through my early career.
Well, is this Saddleback?
It was Escape Country that later was Racing World,
right.
So which is now Coto de Caza multi-million-dollar homes, but
same rough area, but
Southern California racetrack.
Yeah. Well, both of those tracks kind of loomed large over Orange County, so it was easy to go racing.
Yeah, that's Saddleback Park is still 4 miles from my house where I live now, and up until they put the toll road in there, which was still a lot of years back, but we could go in there, go mountain biking, just see cows walking around, but everything was still there. Score tower, starting gate, is untouched pretty much, but anyone that knows that story knows it closed fast and they just wanted it closed, so that was the way it ended.
Yeah, it was insurance trouble back in the day, if I remember right.
Well, it was the Irvine Company going, well, wait a minute, we're being sued for what? Yeah, we'll just close that. We're making zillions of dollars on all our other, properties and investments.
So what was next for you?
That was, it depended on my brother, who was just, goofing with his friends and whatnot. So whenever they decided to race, then I would go race. So we were hit and miss. But obviously I had some abilities, because they said, oh, no, you can't race novice again. You got to race intermediate. So my second time ever racing, I raced intermediate, and it was 2-moto format because it was a month later, and they changed everything. But I won both motos in that class. So I went on to ride intermittently once a month, sometimes longer gaps, for about the first 9-10 months, and then all of a sudden they decided, hey, World Mini's coming to Saddleback Park. You need to race that. And I'm like, okay. So we went there, and by this point I'd ridden some expert class races, going to Indian Dunes, going up against Eric Kehoe and George Holland and these guys who I didn't know them from Adam. I was just a punk kid racing my bike, and I could beat him here or there in a moto, and I wasn't ready, but I guess I was ready. But I went there and got a bunch of thirds behind those two. Those two really were the class act at that time, Eric and George. And so that was kind of my end of, that was April. So my first race ever was May of 78. And so then that was April of 79. I was riding, mini expert and getting podium finishes. And then I got on a 125. And back then, you couldn't ride anything. You could only drop one class, so I had to ride 125 intermediate, and did really well there. Won just about every race. Well, being a poor boy from Costa Mesa, I was just eager to ride the pro class. So I went, and I think it was about 3.5 months after I was a 125 intermediate, I was 125 pro. You just check that box just right above intermediate, and all of a sudden you're a pro. So I was
surprised. Yeah.
Saddleback Saturday. I remember. There's a funny story to that. I was so excited, nervous. I washed everything was perfect, and when I got to Saddleback, everything was perfectly still folded on my dryer at home. So I rode practice in my Levi's. I had boots, but I had like a long sleeve T-shirt and Levi's, and my dad drove my gear out. My brother took me, so I drove my gear out. So I missed the start trying to get my gear on, which resulted in those really quiverish nightmares for about a year or two after that. Mm-hmm. I missed every start in my nightmares. So I was almost a lap behind. There's only 4 guys there, and I managed to beat one and got third. Well, then second moto, I won, and I won with a 3-1.
Nice.
So it was funny. Bobby Sullivan, I don't know if you remember that name. Mm-hmm. He's kind of fat. And then Chris Heiser, mm-hmm. which kind of everyone, especially if you watch the tabloid news these days, him and Heather are still fighting, apparently. So, but yeah, so I'd won my first pro race. And from there, I just became a little more serious. Still had no money, so I was still riding,
whatever.
Junk, secondhand, anything I could get my mm-hmm. hands on. And so that was towards the end, it was like September of '79, I decided, hey, this is something I really want to do. But I still had jobs, I was doing everything under the sun. So for the next few years, I basically went after every purse race there was. Golden States back then were huge, but there was also no shortage of whipping open Cycle News and looking for the next whatever it was, IRC series or some Super Dianza 5000 or something, and you just chased money. And I was lucky enough to be in that era that you could race 5 days out of the 7 days of the week. You had night races all week, and then Saddleback Saturday, and then you could, within a few hours, and sometimes you had to drive up north, but within usually an hour or so, you could find money races somewhere because someone was putting one on nearly every Sunday. So that's what I did for a couple years there. And then I tried riding my first national. I went to Carlsbad, and that's when they were 40 minutes plus 2 lap motos. And I went with my buddy, who decided the beer tent was more important than my racing, and so I was kind of on my own there. And so there's a little funny detail to that day. So first moto, I'm out there, I'm just riding around. I have no idea what place I'm in because I don't know where my friend is that I drove down there with. And I get the 2 lap board, and I got someone right behind me. So I'm thinking, I'm getting lapped, because I look back, it's Jeff Ward, factory Kawasaki Jeff Ward. So I kind of get out of his way, let him go by and finish the race. And I go over and check the scoreboard, and he got 9th and I got 10th. So that was a little bit of an error that I never let happen again. Never let anyone buy that easy. But so that was kind of my only go. I tried that in '82, just did the Carlsbad one. Then '83, like when the Saddleback one came around, I think I had a hurt foot or something. Didn't do that, and so '84, I decided I'm going to go after Golden State real heavy. So, and that's when Golden State was like a full-blown national.
Yeah.
It was 80, 90 guys qualifying down to a 40-man gate, and every box van, every factory box van there was there at every round. And so I got to where I was getting pretty good, top 10, top 6, top 5. So I was feeling fairly confident. Well, coincidentally, my place that I worked full time, I had a 40-hour a week job, laid half the place off. They shut down a couple years later, but we were doing all this metal work it's called a curtain wall system. We built big glass buildings and stuff, but so I had a pretty good job there. And so they laid me off, and my friend Mike Byer and his mechanic were going to he's kind of my training partner, my arch rival, nemesis. They were going to Gainesville for the first outdoor national, and I went, oh man, I'd like to go. I got a few nickels now because I've been working, so I went down there with those guys by myself. They was obviously Mike and his mechanic, but I just kind of towed along on some beat up old RM 125, and went at it. And then Ted, his mechanic, Ted Cabral, says, oh, don't worry. I'll try and help you out. You guys won't be in the same heat race or anything. Sure enough, we're in the same heat race. And sure enough, we were 1-2 in that qualifier. So it was easier, actually, for Ted because he just held the pit board out one time as we both went by. And so that was kind of neat, and got into the national, got second place in the qualifying race. So that felt good. And so the first money, and this story just gets bigger and longer and has lasted, 35 years. But so here we go. Gate drops, racing around. Ted would throw me a little pit sign every once in a while, but I think Mike had got a good start, and I was 10th or something, and I'm banging away, head down, and next thing I know, there's my buddy Mike Byer just up ahead of me a little ways. And I didn't realize, but I passed my way all the way up into 5th place. So I'm just a 3-digit nobody on some beat-up Suzuki, and I'm, I'd passed A.J. Whiting, Gary Bowman, Rick Ryan. I'd passed so many, supported Suzuki or Honda guys or whatever, and feeling pretty good. And I had an opportunity to pass Mike on the last lap, and as the story goes, I needed a ride home from Florida, so so he got 4th and I got 5th. But so that at that point, I was, obviously very happy with that result, and went back to California, and the second round was Saddleback, and just on and on throughout the year. Finally got some help. Just a friend traveled with me, and we did the Nationals, and it was just an awesome time in my life, because at that point it was Guy Cooper's first year also, 107 on a Honda, and I'm 298. I was the price tag. That's what everyone told me. And he and I battled for that Rookie of the Year all year long. We hardly ever battled directly against each other, but right. I would pop ahead a little bit in points. He would pop ahead, and then I had a little bit of a bad run there right at the end. Millville was 3 rounds to go, and hot and humid. First real true hot humid race of the year, and so first moto, I'm passing my way up, doing good. I think I got 6th the first moto, and I think I beat Guy, so I was like, oh, okay, I'm kind of getting closer. So second moto, going, and I'm starting to pass people like towards the end, like everyone's getting tired and overheated and whatever, and I'm like, wow, this is great. So I was in 3rd. That was my best moto of the year, and Guy, who I just passed a couple laps earlier, he could tell it better than me, but he claims that I rode to the side of the track, laid my bike under a shade tree, and just sat down like, Indian squat on the ground. And I don't remember any of this. I woke up in an ambulance packed in bags of ice. I just cooked, overheated.
It hit you, huh?
Oh, it hit me. I didn't see it coming, and yeah, it was the craziest thing, but so that really hurt me. That 20 points would have really helped me. And then I had to ride the last 2 rounds that were back-to-back. We went to Colorado, and then Washougal was the last one, and I was zapped. It's hard to recover from.
Rebound from that. Yeah.
When you cook that bad, I was lights out. They said I was out for over an hour. Wow. Unconscious. They had IV in me and all that stuff. But so I ended up 10th that year. Pretty good for meager effort there, financially anyway. There's a lot of heart and soul in it, but that was definitely had a DNF in High Point. Something broke on the bike, and just a couple things like that had an impact, but didn't really get much help the next year. I think that was just one of those years that was slim pickings, and so that 85 year was just a jockeying around. I started on I think I borrowed a Motocross Action magazine Suzuki, went to Gainesville, came back, rode that same Suzuki at Hangtown, talked to Jim Castillo. He had some Kawasaki's that he had bought from Mike Brown, and they were having disagreements, fights, something or other. So I ended up on these Cowies for the next several rounds, but just some problems, bikes breaking and me crashing and just everything under the sun. And so Ed Scheidler, who we all remember and love, and he's still doing great. He cycles about 1,000 miles a week, but he's like the toughest guy in the world. But he kind of pulled me under his wing and helped me get a test riding job and ultimately some bikes. So at Millville, we went to Pennsauken, New Jersey. There was a Yamaha warehouse, picked up some 85 YZ125s, because I think they were just giving those things away, because the 86 was a whole new bike. So raced Millville, raced the last couple of races on that, and that was kind of the beginning of my Yamaha support. From that point forward, for the last 35 years, I've been a Yamaha guy, with the exception of a few months on a Cagiva. So that was funny. I had somebody else give me a little ribbing about that, like, I knew everything about your career, but I missed the Cagiva part. So,
well, you blinked.
Yeah, exactly. So, in '87, I got wrapped up in the whole 125 pointing out and doing, that stupid thing. I rode one Supercross, Rose Bowl. I broke my back, still stupid enough to get on my bike and finish. So I got 17th in my only 125 Supercross. Had everything all lined up, Yamaha Sport, everything going for 125 class. 1 week before the first Supercross, they sent me a letter. Oh, sorry. We see that you've tried to sign up in the 125 class. You've got too many points. That was a whole... I won't even bore everyone with all that about advancement and non-pro-am and all this kind of BS that they thought was the right schedule.
But, a good idea.
So my support was a bit limited at the end of that year. They gave me some 250s, and I rode some races, and I rode most races. But so come 87, they're like, we'll kind of give you another bike because, these pro guys we really don't care about. If you could ride 125 Supercross, man, we'd pay you $100,000 and give you everything you want. But this whole Cagiva thing kind of fell into my lap, and I said, okay, let me give it a shot. I'll whatever. So it was for Golden State only, but whoever did the best, it was Mike Healy, AJ Whiting, and myself, and of those three, whoever did the best got the full ride for the rest of the nationals with salary and all that. So I won Golden State and Cagiva's only American championship. I think AJ got third and Healy got fifth, and they fired AJ and I and hired Mike Healy. So I think the word was not quite as binding of a contract as one might have thought.
Yeah,
so it was
it
was just a lot of politics with, I had Paul Theed that I, befriended pretty well at that point, and, he was Mr. Wizard, so he would just put every different part, machine it, make it, fit it, whatever, and my bike was very, very good. I never DNF'd a moto, and my bike was strong. We had some other brand brakes on it, some things to just really make it good, but, it looked all 100% Cagiva, and for the most part it was, but just a little bit of tweaking. We didn't allow them to have my bike, so I think that made them angry. But so that was my only little hiatus, and then we were at the end of that. I went crawling back, and it wasn't too much groveling because I'd already told Garrett, I said, I'll probably be back. I don't have a lot of, and Garrett said, go do it. I think I made, back then $50,000 or something in that 3-month period. That's a lot for a starving young motocross guy. So came back, Mike gave me a couple parts, and I went to Phoenix Supercross. So my first real effort at a 250 Supercross, qualified and was running ninth in the main event. I remember battling with Johnny O'Mara, and I was just like shell-shocked going, oh my gosh, I've looked up to this guy for the last 10 years. How is it that I'm passing him, repassing, and ended up having a bike failure, actually, and I just kind of chugged around. The whole rear brake caliper blew apart and old drum brakes. But so went on and did a couple more and qualified and did real well. And then Yamaha, through the testing side, started kind of feeding me parts to test for the race side as well, because Scheidler had, kind of through conversation said, oh, yeah, this guy's hardworking. He's not afraid to stay there for 10 hours in the day. And it's, if you guys need some help too. And so that kind of turned into, by the end of 87, beginning of 88, I was starting to get some good parts just because of my kind of, I guess, my work ethics. I'd stay out there. John R. was crazy, insane, mad scientist, and he would have every combo under the sun. And, Brock would be driving out, Mickey Diamond would be driving, all these guys would be leaving, and I stayed at that old Dianza up in the corner of their Supercross track for, the next 5 hours while John R. thought of every creation he could think of.
Well, somebody had to try all those.
Well, and he told me, I guess now that I think about it, it's a good compliment, but he said, I think you could feel a pea under a mattress, because he would change the slightest thing and then I would somehow be able to give him the answer he was looking for. So that relationship actually turned into, or helped open a lot of doors for me. I was, became kind of a valuable commodity on both sides of the hallway. They used to give me a hard time. Oh, yeah, you work on both sides of the hall, because racing was over there and testing was across the way. But so that really kind of opened so many doors. And then I went to the All Japan Supercross and did real well, just missed the podium there. And so I got a lot of support for the 88 season. That was kind of my first real full year. Yamaha gave me just a chunk of money. I still drove my own van and all that. And that's when, the Yamaha team was huge. We had, I think it was Brock Glover and Mickey Diamond were the two factory guys, but we had a slew of talent. We had Larocco, Kalos, Mike Craig, Myself, there's Larry Ward. I mean, there was like 6 pretty guys that turned out to be some, pretty substantial figures in the motocross world. So that was a great year, because just riding with all those guys and hanging out and just doing all that you do on the road, because I couldn't afford to fly. I only had a little chunk of money, but so that was good. And I ended up, by halfway through the Supercross series, I was beating Mickey and Brock, and pretty much half of those guys were 120, like LaRocco, Larry Ward. There were several 125 guys, but like Kalos, myself, LaRocco, he'd ride some big bikes on the other coast and whatever, but I started being the top Yamaha guy at a lot of those races, somewhere in the top 10, sometimes up getting fifths and stuff like that. So 89, I got the full ride. It was still kind of a B ride, but, I had salary. I got a box fan. They leased me for $1. So, I looked like I was the full deal. And that was a real good turning point. Healthy all year. Right at the end of 88, that was the thing that opened the biggest door, was I podiumed. So it was partway through my first full Supercross series, and I podiumed at LA Coliseum. So Brock's last race, he won. Lachine got second, I got third. So that was a really good night for me, out of, just a Ford Econoline van out in the pits, trying not to get the wheel stolen off.
Yeah. Well, was it actually a Yamaha hauler or not?
No, my Ford van was just a basic old Ford van that I bought used off of wherever you acquired used vans back then. But
penny saver, maybe?
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah, and probably the funniest thing of that whole night is I get back from the podium, happy as can be, and I go to get in my van. Doors are locked. Who's in there? Jim Hawley. As you know the rest of that story.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
And I'm just like, that's something I'll never forget. I'm like, wait a minute. There's got to be 100 places you could go, Jim, and you picked my van. So that was
that's pretty good.
Kind of funny.
Where'd you go after that? I mean, so, you're working your way up the ladder.
Yeah, so I climbed the ladder fast, and I know, I was always fairly honest with myself that I was never the fastest guy, but I think I just had value there, because by this time, now along comes Damon Bradshaw. This is 89. And, he came out and he did some testing on 125s for the production side. And so we got along well. And so I think Keith saw the value in me to kind of, kind of hang out with this Damon guy, help keep him on the straight and narrow. And it was a great relationship, because, I was older. I was 10 years older than him by then. I was 26 or something. He was 16. And, that was when he went and won Tokyo Supercross that year up against Rick Johnson and all that, and I was there with him, and we all just through all of those trips and times, Japan and everywhere else that we went, we kind of became good friends. So I think that really kind of extended my Yamaha career, because I was the papa of the team, the guy that knew how to train and knew what to do, and how to kind of conduct himself, and here, please kind of shed a little bit of that over this way and help these guys all keep going straight. But so 89 is when I had a lot of good results, and I ended up, I think, 6th in the 250 outdoor, 6th in the Supercross, and 4th in the 500 outdoor. That's when we rode those YZ360s. So that combined, that's when back when you earned your number. I got number 7, so pretty good climb up the ladder from couple years before, riding a Kajiva for a few extra bucks in Golden State, just trying to make ends meet. But so 89, fantastic year, no injuries, little stuff, but got through everything good. And so in 1990, it was only 2 of us on the factory team. It was Damon and I. I was number 7 and he was number 8 for 1990. So we were, everything was great and life was good. And then injury after injury after injury. I just ended up, I started off the year, injury in Japan for the Supercross. So barely, muscled through, because everybody thinks when your helmet's on and you're down there on the track, you're healthy. But we all know that it's a little bit different story. Especially back then, there's just so few jobs available. We were riding taped up, just whatever we could, because we wanted to hold on to that job. So we That was just a tough year. Just one thing after another, a wrist, a knee, a foot, just agony, just all the way through. So next year I was still factory guy, everything good, slipped to number 12, I think, or no, 15, because that was also another year that kind of began with injury, and I got knee injury at San Diego Supercross thinking, oh yeah, it's just scope and it'll be good, and I missed 7 rounds. So by the time I came back, there was only, because I think we had 14 rounds back then, it was only like 3 rounds left. So I went to Oklahoma City. I got like a 10th or something, just I was getting my feet wet. Came back the next week and won my only Supercross, won San Jose. So again, there was great things that happened, but injury and just certain things kind of really, my career went left, right, a lot of times. And the last race I got 5th at LA Coliseum. I was determined not to win one and then get 10th or something at the next round.
Well, the pressure's on then.
Yes, it was. Those guys are, I think everybody had a target on my back, especially Guy Cooper, because that poor soul never won a Supercross. I think he got 7 seconds or something. I mean, I never got a second. I got several thirds and 1 first, and I always felt bad for Guy because that incident with him and Chicken, but it's racing. We've all been on both sides of that score, so it is what it is. But, then I finally got healthy towards the end of that, had some decent stuff towards the end of that year, and then 92 was actually a good year for me again. Stayed pretty healthy. One of my highlights of that year was I led Gainesville, the first outdoor, first moto, on and off. Stanton and I traded the lead for 30 minutes and a half a lap. I led to the 2-lap board, and then my good buddy Bradshaw ran me wide out by the highway, and didn't win that moto. But
dang it.
But I had some good stuff go on. Some podiumed outdoor that same year. I think Hangtown, and just had some good stuff going on. And then into that year, another injury, Japanese Supercross. So it was like, here we go again. Let's go to Orlando, and saw the cast off a week before, and it wouldn't. It was a mid-foot injury, and if you know anything about that, it's knuckles like in the other joints that you have knuckles, but they're really low movement and complex knuckles. And I bent my foot in half. They said it's like a football player, a lineman that gets squashed by a 400-pound guy and folds his foot in half. Yeah, I did a simple crash, but my bike did a flip in the air and came down on the back of my heel and
smashed you.
Yeah, smashed my foot. So that was a long injury. I missed a bunch of 93. So then, in my Doug Dubach typical fashion, I worked so hard to come back and hold on to my job that I ended up with it's the soup du jour flavor of the month, whatever you want to call it, but it was Epstein's-Barr, chronic fatigue, mono, whatever name you want to give it. I was wiped out. So by the end of that race season, nothing. I couldn't even ride a moto. And I sat out some races, and I kind of saw the writing on the wall, because that's when everything kind of shifted. Wyndham was sniffing around Emig. They were kind of changing the team anyway. So that's pretty much when my full, real Yamaha career started. I was, talk about working both sides of the hallway. I was riding 5, 6, 7 days a week, doing stuff for racing, doing stuff for testing, and got really busy through those years, and still would pop in and do a national. Tim and Scott Buffalo from BSY down in Florida, they were nice enough to torture me and then reward me with some good racing, support. But they made me ride one of those, not a hare and hound, but what are the races down there?
GNCC.
GNCC. Yeah. Oh, no, it'll be fine. You're a fast motocrosser. You'll do great. Yeah, they were lying right to my face,
Well, it's funny, a couple of the guys that I've seen go over and do GNCC races, I'll ask some of the regulars there, how are these guys going to do? And they say, well, they'll do pretty good for the first 2 hours, except that it's a 3-hour race. So.
Yeah, somebody made it a 3-hour race. Well, yeah, it's a laughable, the whole event. They tell me, hey, as long as you get that thing started on the first kick, you'll hole shot. I don't even think I had a half a kick into it. That thing fired. I'm ripping down into the first turn last. I'm like, I think these guys' bikes were running. I don't know, but I got it. It was just a snowball from there. A vine. There's a lot of little viney trees in through there. Ripped a handguard off, and I was on the ground. Ran out of gas once. Had to run out of the woods. First gas can I saw, luckily most everything was two-stroke back then, drugged this guy's gas can back into the wood, only put enough gas to get me out, and I did deliver his gas can back to his truck just to finish that lap. Flat tire, everything. I think the highest I got was maybe fourth or fifth, and then last lap, tree stump through the radiator hose, DNF.
Done.
Way in the back. And then the highlight of that day was Jerry Bernardo, who we all know and love. He comes into this checkpoint that I'd kind of meandered through the bushes and found. And, he looked like death warmed over, right? So he pulls into this checkpoint, stops as they mark his fender, and I jump on the back of his bike. Come on, Jerry! And you talk about looks could kill. He turns around and in the best Jerry Bernardo voice, get off! And so the message was clear. I got off and went on my way. But after that, they never made me do another one of those. And then they went up to High Point with me and, Gainesville. And we probably rode 4 or 5 races every year for the next couple of years because I was full-time test guy. So I would just pop in because I still loved to race and I could do well. And then, 96 is when the real, job became, because that's when the four-stroke development, kind of end of 95, beginning of 96. Man, I was on a plane to Japan every few weeks. I was all over the place, involved in that first YZ400. So that took on a whole nother turn of time and involvement. But, I feel so lucky to be involved, kind of the key guy in that whole movement that changed the whole motocross world, really.
Mm-hmm. What were the teething problems like back on those bikes back in the day?
Well, it's funny because I think everybody who had that, image of what it could or was going to be like, I was one of the worst guys. And I pictured Spud Walters, who I knew well, and riding that XR400 with every aftermarket thing bolted to it. I think it must have weighed 700 pounds, but that thing just sounded and looked so bad every time I saw it. I'm like, and that was the image I had in my head. And that thing came over, and we rode it at Carlsbad the first time. I think they went there because they knew that's where it would shine. And it was slow, and it was heavy. And, we did all of our work, and we got through it. And then, the next time we saw it was pretty quick, maybe like 8 weeks later, we saw it again, and it was a marked improvement. Just performance. Weight was still there, but it was down. They lost some weight because the early ones, everything was handmade. So cases were all billet, and, fuel tank was not carbon fiber, but fiberglass, and everything was just so heavy. So it slowly started getting more and more production parts as the, time went on, and the performance started coming up, and but, it's just like anything. You make it run harder, and then it would start to fail and, break valve guides and just little things. So you
find the next weakest link?
Yeah, exactly. As soon as you make this thing stronger, now the next thing breaks. But it was really interesting because since I kind of worked both sides of the hallway, now, Doug Henry was riding that works bike. Well, that thing, as, kind of it unfolded, was a handful to ride because, they were trying to make it as much like a 250 two-stroke as they could. They were making it aggressive, fast, all the geometry. They were, kind of tracing that off the two-stroke bike, and that thing was kind of evil compared to the production bike. So, it was very tough for me to ride that thing, help them, and then ride this, and I wanted to go tell them, hey, you guys, you should really talk the production guys into loaning you one of these bikes and just put Doug's engine in it, because his engine was still great. But man, just our foot peg location, just everything, we had kind of evolved from that original hybrid thing that they'd put together based off a 252 stroke. So there's just a lot of interesting things along the way. There's some crazy stories. We went to Europe. This is, several months when we were finally starting to do some durability testing. We fly all the way to Holland to ride sand tracks to really torture this bike. Get there, pack up everything, travel a couple hours down to the track, get up the next morning, everything's gone. Somebody broke into the truck and stole everything. One of two in the world of that YZ400 spare engine. We thought the inside rumor was KTM stole it all, but it was a prototype YZ250 that we were going to test there as well, and KX500. We had this big truck full of everything gone. So Joel Albrecht, who was working at Yamaha, so he and I got a nice little European vacation because we turned around, basically got on a plane the next day and came home.
Wow.
Never rode a lap.
Did they ever find it?
Well, there's some strange laws in Europe, and apparently possession is everything. So I'm told, I don't know how much of this is true, but I'm told that there was a dark figure in a dark alley that negotiated back, and I don't know if they ever actually bought it all back, but there's some strange things went on to where, this guy had possession and he wanted to make some money, and whether he was the original guy that stole it or not, but this is all a little hearsay, and so I don't know what happened, but I believe they got the bike back eventually, but I don't think they ever got spare engine and all that. So crazy times.
Yeah, but that's a killer when one, like you said, one of two, and
then we put a little kibosh on our whole program. We ended up having to go back, and then I think we went to Japan to ride the other bike, and because this was still early. This was probably end of 97. Or middle of 97, probably, because that thing, it was a little bit of a late release. I think it was a December release, because I remember that because I went to a Winter Series race and ended up, having to have somebody hold my bike, and I had to run up and down the start line and start every pro's bike. I think like 5 or 6 of them that day.
You had the drill down?
Well, it was simple if you knew it, but it wasn't so simple if you didn't. I mean, there was guys literally, because it had a compression release on it. There was guys literally holding that compression release in, is kicking their brains out. I mean, it was like a 40-degree morning, and I come out and the guys in the pit area that are just dripping sweat because they had that compression. I said, it's not going to start if you never release that lever.
Right.
That's only to bump it past the compression stroke. Well, so it's funny. We made a video of that. I don't know if you ever saw that fine masterpiece, but everybody joked with me, did you make that like in Vietnam? Because there's, in the back of Yamaha, there's a bunch of bamboo. I don't know why it's there, but there's a whole big, like a slew of bamboo, and they shot it over there because I was quiet from road noise or something, but it looks like I'm in Cambodia shooting this How to Start a YZ400 video, so if you maybe go Google that somewhere, it might still exist. How to Start a YZ400.
That's funny. Well, you talked a little bit about being able to feel a pee under a mattress. Talk about the whole test process when you're working on developing bikes. What's it like?
Well, it's I believe that it's something you have, like an ability to communicate, and then when you do it long enough, you learn a lot of little tricks along the way, kind of how to isolate things and really pay attention to certain components. And because, you've got long forms that are, a couple pages long with a lot of, items on each page, and you got multiple bikes, and all of a sudden you could be overwhelmed so easily. But you've got to really just start to isolate, understand, what the priorities are and what you're looking for, and, where the things come from, in its inception, and kind of what the design purpose is, what their target is, so there's a lot of things that go into it. So you've got to, have all that. And I'm not trying to make it sound overcomplicated more than it is, but you just have to, it's a basic understanding of what their targets are, kind of what the weaknesses are, and what they're trying to achieve. And then you can set about kind of breaking it down to more simple terms. Okay, well, we're really going after a certain engine character, and, this other model that we've purchased is our target, so those things help streamline it a bit. Then you can really grab onto it, because I'm one of those guys that I've just been able to do lots of laps and very, in my own little zone, and I can just start to really pick things apart. And then I get on the other bike, and everyone makes fun of me that I get back on the other bike, and I really like to, understand it so I can speak to the person that needs to know the information with some clarity. It's not just that's better, that one's worse, or whatever. And sometimes I get beat up because I don't keep it simple enough. I start, introducing new terms, and that's taboo. You can't say squishy when it was soft, or, you can't introduce a new word. You've got to kind of keep within the understandable vocabulary. These are the set words. Don't deviate from these. So, there's certainly a lot of challenges along the way, but, it's a matter of just understanding what you're trying to accomplish, and then and I think just being more of a mechanical person, I've understood the function of a four-stroke engine since I was a very young boy, pretty much, and just being involved in that and understanding and learning so much from my father. When I got on bikes, I understood why this was good and why this wasn't good at, I think, a different level than another person would. So it certainly carried my career and again, just opened doors that would never have been opened otherwise. And on top of that, just being involved at that level in the sport, you learn from, other test riders, other engineers, the way they communicate something back to you, and I got to where I was doing a lot of testing for a lot of different functions in the industry. I did Dunlop tires for over 20 years, and, same thing. They, I think, through whatever level of communication, they're like, wow, this guy can really start to articulate what's going on with the tire, not just, oh, that one's harder, this one's softer, but roll and flex and, acceleration delay and just all these terms that they would start to go, oh, okay, hey, well, this is great. Let's use that guy again, because he kind of, feels what the engineers were setting it out to, decide A or B, and for the reasons that he's actually come back without previous knowledge, and he's told us, this is why A is better than B. And so I had a lot of success that way, just through, and again, experience. I may not have been the best tire guy day one, but after about 9,000 laps around Carlsbad, you start to understand kind of what they're looking for and what the differences are from, wall thickness to, rubber compound to, just even how they lay the core inside, a couple degrees difference of the wrap of the core. There's certain things, and then you start to, just become relaxed and comfortable with it, and it becomes what you do day in, day out, and yeah, it just was something that really, really I enjoyed. I guess on top of all of that, it's not just I'm out there begrudgingly earning a couple $100 in the day and putting some laps in. I really...
They're torturing you to ride.
Yeah, I really enjoy that side of motorcycling. Still to this day, I don't do a lot of stuff for Yamaha anymore, but Steve Butler will invite me out here and there, and every once in a while he'll ask me, you still like this? And I'm like, dude, I love this stuff, because it's just being involved at that level it's just awesome.
Well, you put your stamp on it for a lot of years.
Yes, that the Yamaha certainly used that for many, many years, because I think I was that guy. However, all the moons and stars aligned, I was that guy that people began to understand. Hey, this guy is this, like human dyno. We just put him on there, and he spits out a report the other side, and hey, we get some pretty good information. And so they turn that into a marketing tool, and so that certainly helped me and just everything that I did, and again opened other doors and just gave me life after racing. I'm going to be 55 years old tomorrow, and I can't think of any time that I've been off a bike for more than a week or so at a time, just doing something, for my own company. We haven't even touched on that. I think we've been talking for an hour, but, funny, the segue into that unintentionally is that's kind of why I started my company was, at the time I'm racing for White Brothers, I'm doing development for Mitch, and I'm trying to kind of make sense of all of it. And nobody wanted to deal with the four-stroke when it first came out. Mitch told me, I think I'll never be a race bike, that's a trail bike. And the White Brothers, they just didn't really have any experience, so they were just it's got to be bigger's got to be better. And they were making these things that just weren't running great. It looked good on the dyno and all that, and kind of so it was my wife is who I blame for all the chaos for the last 20 years that I've had Dubach Racing, almost 20 years. But I was venting one day, and she goes, hey, you should just do it yourself. And I'm like, I'm just a dumb dirt bike guy. I couldn't possibly do that. But, through the support of my wife, and we got a couple good employees early on, and, again, we climbed that. Much like I did in my racing career, I went from never making a pipe before to winning just about every pipe shootout for the next 3 or 4 years after I opened my doors. But I think that, and not to say, I'm just the greatest guy in the whole world, but I think what I was doing different than everybody else is I was actually getting out there and testing them. I was seat of the pants. I was applying that same knowledge that I had, either began with or learned from through all those years, all those meetings I sat in, all those long days in Japan, all that stuff. I was applying that to how I developed my own stuff. I understood how good stock was, and I didn't ignore that. And I said, let me try and, let me match stock first and then go from there. Because, I think the mistake a lot of people make is they just kind of throw that stock one aside and just start whiz-banging, this ran good on that other bike, and we've already made that. Let's stick. So I've kind of approached it completely different, more. I mean, I own a dyno. I use it and whatever for information, but I do 90% of my stuff seat of the pants, where the end user will use it on basically a fairly standard bike. So that's my base, and so I think that's why I was so dominant in all those pipe shootouts, is because I was doing it very different than everybody else.
Seat of the pants dyno is very different from regular dyno.
It is, and you can get very good on your dyno, and you can pull out a lot of good information, but as good as I got running my dyno, I still wouldn't get the answers. And it was funny, there was, right in the era when we started breaking bikes in on the dyno, because that was, we understood that breaking them in, they ran a little better with an hour time on them rather than just dead cold and dead new. And I remember we would, okay, this one showed the best number, let's give that to so-and-so, and this one showed, this was strong. And inevitably, soon after, we started doing suspension break-in, because we realized, that was another component that we needed to address to benefit for our outcome of these shootouts. And so I remember going, hey, which one ran the best? And we're looking at all these dyno stuff, and I'm like, you could have fooled me. I said, that one runs the best. And they're like, there's no way. That thing was a half a horsepower down. I go, well, for whatever reason, I would take that one to a race all day long before that other one that you're trying to shove down whatever the top magazine at the time was. And so then we started kind of switching up that. We'd dyno them all just to break them in, but then we would start we'd pick 1, 2, 3, and 4 out of our seat of the pants test. And that really kind of taught us all that, those guys that we pay to ride those bikes are kind of be smart sometimes. And so we had some good success. I mean, Yamaha had a lot of good success for a lot of years there with all the shootouts, especially first 4-strokes. And, our 2-strokes were very good at that time. Our 252-stroke was one of the best bikes. And so, some of those little things you learn along the way that the dyno's not telling you the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Manufacturers don't try and stack the deck in shootouts, do they?
No, I didn't say that. They would never do that. The old Crippa sandwich, I think that was what won a lot of shootouts for a while there. If anybody knows, Eric Crippa was the Honda guy, and we thought he made the best sandwich, even though if their bike wasn't that good. That first aluminum frame Honda, the 97 250, was probably the worst bike you could ever ride, but I think he made a pretty good sandwich because that thing won a few shootouts.
That's pretty good. You talked a little bit about number 15. How has that stuck for you?
Well, there's a few things, and I'm not one of those psycho, superstitious guys that's, I got to have a blue sock and a red sock. Well, okay, I've done that a couple times. But anyways, I'll throw you a little bit of trivia. You can use this at a party. Mike LaRocco, he won his first national moto down in Texas. What was he, 559? Why is he 125? And that was something that everyone joked about. He didn't have the right sock or whatever. He put a red sock and a blue sock on, and he went out and won his first moto. He wore a lot of red socks and blue socks for a long time after that. Anyways, so you could use that at a party and stump your friends. But so with number 15, that number kept coming up in just various times. Like I went my very first race was on the 15th of May ever. You know, the one I talked about back at Escape Country 1,000 years ago. I thought that was kind of funny. And then like I went to Europe. Geneva was the big Supercross. It was like Paris Supercross, Geneva Supercross. Well, I went and I won both nights there, and I was number 15 that night, or that weekend or whatever. And I beat Jean-Michel Bale straight up, which I'd never done before, and Ron Lachine, Guy Cooper, Greg Albertine. I mean, it was not like nobody showed up, and I won both nights.
It was working for you.
Yeah, and so I remembered that that stuck in the back of my head. And, some years later, I won San Jose Supercross on June 15th, running number 15. So that was another little weird kind of 15-15 thing. So it just became the number after my career, because you still earned them. I mean, I think I had, beside Barry Carson, I think I've had the most top 100 numbers. Because, I think 20 years or something, 23 years or something, I had top 100 numbers. So they bounced all over, so you could never really have a number. But once all the dust had settled, I'm kind of like, oh, that's pretty cool. I think I don't even know, when you're doing the four-stroke series, and, what number do you want to do? I'll run 15. I kind of like that number. And so it sort of stuck from there, and then it's just on and on. It's just kind of been there, and all my kids and all their sports, baseball, soccer, all that, they ran 15 on all their jerseys, and then it was kind of crazy. A lot of years later, 99, my father passed away on June 15th. It was 8 years after I'd won my Supercross on June 15th. So that was another little weird thing. And I almost thought my first daughter was going to be born she was born June 11th. And then my second daughter was August. And then my son, he was coming in there for June 15th. And I don't know, Mama, he liked the warm, I don't know, whatever, but he stretched it out to the 19th of June, so kind of missed that one. And his cousin was born on June 15th, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, that was close enough. But so that's just kind of, little stuff, and it's just, now it's kind of my number, I loan it to Dean Wilson, and, I let Tim Ferry run it there for a while, so, we're all agree on it all.
That works.
It works.
After pro racing, a lot of years at the vet worlds, and that was kind of your thing for a while. Well,
it's funny because Jody Weissel of MXA called me because, him and Tom White were putting all that stuff together. I think that was maybe the 5th annual, or I don't know. They had been doing it a little while, and come out. And as a, fading pro, you don't want to admit that you've hit that 30 mark. So I'm like, I don't know. And anyway, he convinced me to do it at Paris Raceway. It was the only year it was at Paris, and that's pretty good racing with Jeff Ward and Johnny O'Mara, and I managed to win, and I was like, oh, that was kind of cool. So kind of came and went, and I think that was the only time Mitch ever paid me any money. So he said, if you run a front fender sticker, I probably only gave me $50, I can't even remember, but I think that was the only time I ever got money out of Mitch. But so as time went on, oh yeah, I'll go do it again, and so it was at Glen Helen, and did it again, and I won, and then all of a sudden, you get to 7, 8, 9 wins, and then it's like, man, I'm going to kind of prepare for this next year, and this next year, and this next year, and 26 titles later, I'm still going to that place, and they keep letting me win. It's the strangest thing. They give me a trophy, and everybody claps, and then I go home. So it's a good time.
Well, you've had some good rivalries with guys over the years.
Boy, I've had some. I wish I had every one of them on a GoPro or something. It was a little before times. Jeff Ward and I, probably 3 or 4 years into me doing these things, went down to the last lap. I passed him 3 straightaways to go, and we were going fast. I mean, it wasn't no old fat guy's race. It was on, and I remember winning that one, and I had another one with Guy Cooper there. Guy Cooper came out a couple times, and I beat him every time, but by the skin of my teeth, because he and I were just rivals from day one. And I can remember the way the sun set there was kind of a downhill dropping away jump, and I'm already on the ground. It's you go left and then a U-turn, and there's the finish. The second moto, I'd won the first one, and I'm leading the second one, and I could see his shadow was 40 feet ahead of him. I'm like, this guy must still be in the air somewhere. And if you've ever ridden against Guy Cooper, you know that he's kind of likes to over-rev the bike. So I think we hit in that turn, hit in the next turn, and I managed to beat him to the finish. So, yeah, I mean, I've had some pretty epic battles there with, Casey Johnson. Luckily, Rhino was a little wounded one year, and he and I don't know if you remember that year, but the three of us on the last lap had traded so many times. I had the overall. Rhino had the overall. Casey ended up winning. But, I mean, it was just trade and paint for the last 5 corners. And, yeah, Casey won, and I don't even know who got second or third, Rhino and I. But, yeah, there's been some, and fast guys, not like, just a bunch of spodes running around there. I know that it's a fairly long, Kurt Nickel, he's no slouch. And he and I have had some pretty good run-ins there, and he doesn't hold a grudge too long. I think the first time he expected to win and didn't win, it was only about 6 months he didn't talk to me. Now, I won last year, and I think 3 or 4 weeks tops, and he was talking to me again. So he doesn't have much of a competitive bone in his body, but so it's been it's turned into like this whole second career of racing, really.
Are you more proud of the stuff you did as a pro or the second half?
I don't know. I've been asked that question before, and I really don't have a preference. Being in the record books of winning a Supercross is something that, not too many people can say. So that's a fantastic accomplishment. Even getting on the podium, I had several podiums as a pro and led some motos and had some, all that stuff is so wonderful. But the vet racing is just a little different flavor. I'm still getting invited. I go to England every year. I, went to Italy last year for that Trans-Bagara race. And, just you end up in places that you wouldn't without what you've done. So I think just all of my, ignorance as a dumb dirt bike guy, just wanting to keep enjoying it all, it continues to open doors. And so I really appreciate that side of it. It's a great time. I'm here in Southwick, get to race 125 Dream Race with my son tomorrow. Something like that it's pretty cool. I probably be pinching myself tomorrow sitting on the start gate next to him because it's just going to be one of those cool moments that you don't even realize. But all that wouldn't happen if I wasn't such a diehard, guy that just keeps working and keeps plugging away and doing all this kind of stuff. So I love this half of it, the vet half, because I rode through the pits today kind of checking my bike, and I had to stop 10 times because I'm seeing guys that I once wanted to kill and other guys that John Dowd, he goes to that England race. We joke that we have to go to England to hang out because he lives on the one coast and I live on the other. But yeah, there's just I think it's all great. I'm thankful for every moment, every lap, every opportunity I've had along the way.
What brought you to the Nationals this year? I think you're doing some coaching again.
Yeah, it's one of those things, kind of an unintentional bonus to what I do. I was in Japan doing some Yamaha testing a few years back, and they were looking for someone to take a guy kind of at a higher level of real coaching, training, development. And I didn't even, I kind of had pushed him towards Travis Preston, because Travis at that time was doing that sort of stuff. And I was still just doing a million other things. And as everything unfolded, it ended up back in my lap. So I did it and helped the guy that's here this weekend, injured, unfortunately. But helped him through, a few months of winter training, went back. He had some great results. So all of a sudden they said, oh, hey, let's send him again. And, now this is 3 years into it. He won their championship, and they gave him a verbal promise that, hey, if you win the title, we'll let you go to the U.S. Because they take a big summer break. So I kept trying to get him to send him over for a couple races. They take like a 6-week summer break. I said, I'll send him over. That'd be the greatest thing for him to see, kind of a whole nother side of racing, a whole nother level, arguably, and they'd be doing nothing but good. But anyway, he ended up winning, and so now he's here. So he's living with me. His name is Yusuke Watanabe, and no relation to the world champ Watanabe, but Great guy. We've built a nice relationship over the years, and so he's here riding all 12 races, and I got the nod to go coach him, and just be that guy that kind of helps him stay out of the trenches, with all the alligators and the broken glass, and try and get him pointed in the right direction. So that's what's allowed me to come here and have some fun at Southwick.
Well, it'll be fun to watch you and your son race tomorrow, and I appreciate the time.
Well, thank you so much, and if you're in the Southwick area, come on out. And I think it's only a 4 or a 5 lap race, and so I'm just hoping I can dig back into some of that good starting technique and get my 160-pound frame down to that first turn. My son's over here in the background shaking his head, all 115 pounds of him. So I think I'm going to take his paddle tire off and give him like an old wore-out hard pack tire for the start.
Well, thanks, Doug. We'll see you.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, gang. We hope you enjoyed the conversation with Doug. He's got some more tales to tell for sure. We may have to revisit with him down the road. That's it for Episode 3 of the Inside Line presented by Thor, celebrating 50 years of racing heritage, the first, the forever, Thor Motocross. We also have to thank Chaparral Motorsports. For more than 30 years, Chaparral Motorsports has been sharing its love of dirt bikes with like-minded individuals by offering a massive selection of the latest riding gear, new models, parts and accessories, and great pricing on tires. Visit chapmoto.com. That's chapmoto.com. Ready for some more bench racing? Look for the next Inside Line a couple of weeks from now. In the meantime, you can subscribe at iTunes or Stitcher so you don't miss any future episodes, and you can also go back and check out previous shows. If you're feeling really generous, leave us a rating and review. Thanks.